Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Hi. It's great to see all your faces and very happy to be here. Marco is very happy to be back with us
Yeah,
too.
we missed you.
Yeah. So,
Hi, Marco.
We gotta go to work,
I'm we're gonna start just with our introductions and our icebreaker. Does anybody have a pressing icebreaker they'd like to use? Suzette, you had
I
some.
had them all in last week. I don't know. My brain is
Okay,
fried today.
okay, let's just so
Sorry.
what we do with our introductions is just say the name that we want to use on this call tonight, and our pronouns, and an icebreaker is just to kind of get to know a little something low key, low stress about each other, and like the name implies, break the ice. And so let's do the icebreaker of what's your favorite kind of weather? So I am Carol, she, her, and I like that autumn crispness when it first starts getting a little chill in the air and the leaves start turning and it's nice and cool at night. That's my favorite kind of thing. So we're coming at you from Lubbock today, and it was 101, and so we're not in our favorite kind of weather, or not mine anyway. How about you? Said I'm sorry I missed last time. What what's your name?
Michael, I got to get him over the key Michael on Michael.
He said I'm Marco, he, him, or King Marco, or Army Marco.
I just think I am right, okay?
What's your favorite kind of weather?
I got.
You like sunny? You like it hot? Hot and sunny?
Yeah, I think I think I
Okay. Well, let's. How about Adrian?
Okay, my name is Adrian, he, him. Um, my favorite type of weather is kind of when it gets a bit rainy, like just a bit. I just enjoy kind of that little when it gets a little bit dark and rainy, not thunderstorm hard, but just a nice little rain. It just becomes very cozy to be at home and just like watch a movie or just read a book, and while it's outside just hear the nice sound of the rain.
Oh, that's beautiful. That brings me a nice feeling. How about Lynn?
I'm Lynn, and she, her. Autumn is my favorite time of the year. I love the, I mean, in Texas, I'm not sure we ever have autumn, actually. It's either hot or it's cold, but I have lived in other parts of the country where there's the break in summer and it's starting to get to winter, but it's not cold, 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 but it's just it's you need a sweater. And what I like to think of as sweater weather. That's my favorite kind of weather.
Hmm.
Not rain, sunshine, blue skies, and cool. That's my favorite time.
Yeah. Kreger?
Gregor, he, they, and I like clouds. We had the last week of July was cloudy here in Austin, and there were 3 days when the temperature didn't even get to 90 because of the clouds and the rain showers. And so I just really enjoyed the break from the heat that week. And now when a cloud comes in front of the sun, I'm like, thank you, God, because I'm outside at least 90 minutes every day, either walking or riding my bike. So I'm always outside.
Suzette?
Well, I'm Suzette, she, her, and I'm gonna say, I'm born in November, so I'm definitely a fall person. But my absolute favorite time is when there's a first fallen snow and it's absolutely silent, and there's not even so much as little bird feet in the snow prints. And just that's just a memory from childhood that I can think of was a happy time looking at the trees as they canopied over the street with the snow on them. So I don't get to see that anymore
Okay.
in
Yeah,
Texas.
I was gonna say that you don't get that too often there.
Not unless I go visit it.
Don't
Yeah.
you remember February 2021? We had 6 inches of snow in Austin. That was a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when a city's not used to it, that's really, really hard. And traffic, yeah, we won't even go there. Okay, we're talking about good things, our favorites. So this is God Talk, where we are free to express our opinions in a safe and respectful way. And tonight we are kind of continuing a discussion. That doesn't mean you have to have been here previously at all. July was Disability Pride Month, and we ended the month with talking about mobility disabilities, particularly, and inclusion. Last week we started talking about neurodiversity a little bit, but we got a little, we didn't get too deep into the issue, partly because of some technical issues. And anyway, so we can talk a little bit more about neurodiversity, but we're gonna increase that umbrella a little bit, and we're gonna also talk about things like intellectual disabilities, such as, which, like, also called developmental delays, generalized neurodevelopmental disorders, things like that. And also about things like Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. So let me just start with a couple of general definitions. First, when we talk about cognitive disorders, Marco was involved in his high school in a group called Best Buddies, where people with intellectual disabilities were paired with seniors in the regular classes. Yeah, Best Buddies was a really neat group, huh? So they had a campaign one time called No R Word. And I imagine you can understand why that is important. What do y'all think? What do you know about that? Do you
Well,
know what
it's
I mean
labeling,
by no R word? I can't even say the word. I don't even want to say the word.
It's labeling, and it's not okay. We don't know what somebody is, we don't know anything. I mean, just because you have a speech impairment doesn't mean you have a cognitive impairment. Just because you have a muscular impairment doesn't mean you have a cognitive impairment. So it's not for us to be the judge of, what that person's capable of. And I think when we label people, it is damaging.
I think that's very true. I think that's very, very true. The definition used to be based on IQ, like an IQ less than 70. That would be the definition. But nowadays, cognitive intellectual disability includes more than just IQ. It means things like your level of functioning, and your ability to interact socially as well as your IQ. So there could be variations. There's more involved in the diagnosis. When we talk about intellectual disability, we're generally talking about things that are present at or near the time of birth in the developmental period, as opposed to something like dementia, where your cognitive functioning can be impaired, but it's something that happens later in life. Or opposed to something acquired, like if you had a bad head injury and that affected your ability to think. So what I have sometimes told people, what Marco's diagnosis is cerebral palsy, and that is a pretty common form of. It can involve intellectual disabilities, but it doesn't always. There are a lot of people with cerebral palsy who only their motor functioning is affected. So what I'd like to tell like new caregivers or somebody that's not familiar with cerebral palsy, it's like having a stroke when you're either in the womb or in the first year of life. So just like older people who have strokes, hi, Craig. Just like people who have strokes, it can affect a small part of your brain. It can affect your ability to talk, or it can affect like your ability to use one side of your body, your ability to walk. It can affect your ability to talk. It may or may not affect your ability to process things in the same way that you did before a stroke. So just like that, people with cerebral palsy may have a high IQ, an average IQ, a low IQ, and they may have issues like Marco with moving, with muscular abilities, mobility issues. They may have more or less ability to speak, and sometimes that's because of motor issues. Sometimes that's because of issues in the speech center of the brain. So it all depends. So whereas somebody with cerebral palsy is oftentimes able to put down memories in the way anybody would. Somebody with dementia, it's a more of a global change in the brain functioning, where it's much less likely to put down new memories, or to have short-term memory. Some people with dementia have normal long-term memory, like they might remember what happened in childhood, but they can't remember what happened 5 minutes ago. So any questions about definitions or anything, or any comments? Some of you may know more than I do about these definitions. Okay.
No, I just think as a society, though, that we're more tuned into those things as opposed to maybe when I was in high school. The labeling was the way it was, and now I feel like there's way more sensitivity to all of that. So
yes, just like we said about neurodiversity last week, and much more common diagnosis, for example, of ADHD, and especially a lot of late diagnoses for women, particularly because the behaviors associated can also be just culturally more acceptable for women than they are for men, like being more emotional, for example. So neurodiversity, I said last week that the definition of neurodiversity meant that you did not have a developmental disorder. And when I was trying to do more reading about it, I'm not sure that's always true. In other words, like somebody with autism could also have an intellectual disability and therefore be labeled as having a developmental delay. So it's not real cut and dried, but in general, we're not going to say somebody has like we're not as likely to look for a diagnosis of ADHD, for example, in somebody who has cerebral palsy or Down syndrome or something like that.
But
Well,
that
when I was
probably
a
is
child,
something. Sorry, Craig.
no, I was just going to say when I was growing up, when I was a little kid in Wisconsin, and this is, the late 60s and early 70s, I had a cousin. It was my mom's older sister. My mom and her older sister were very close. And, but Aunt Shirley had a daughter named Peggy, and I don't even know what her diagnosis was, right? But she was in a wheelchair, and I can remember her, like being, and they literally, back in those days, they literally put her in a facility. She didn't get to stay with the rest of the family, and we would only get to see her like maybe once or twice a year, like at Christmas or something like that, when they would bring her out. It was never talked about. It was not never a word was said about it. So like I said, and she died pretty young. I mean, I think she was like 30 or so when she died. She wasn't very old. And so I think now things like that, it's much more open to talk about stuff and share with families and stuff like that. I wish I would have had the opportunity to try to know Peggy if there was a chance to know Peggy, because like I said, they just put her away.
Let's use Peggy as an example. How do you think that Peggy would have influenced the life of a congregation if she had been more involved in family and getting out, and if she had been part of church life?
Well, there would have had to have been some education, back then, because people just didn't know. People were afraid. They didn't know how to react, because, no one ever, if there was little exposure to stuff like that. Like when someone like that was born, it was like almost immediately they got put in a home or a facility, and you never saw them, and they weren't taken out in public a lot. And so, and nowadays you can pretty much go anywhere and see someone with special needs out and about. So,
But you still hear some ignorant comments sometimes, like, what was it? I think there's been one on Facebook that's been repeated a lot where somebody was like, there's just no, I can't find when we go out at night, there's just, why can't I can't find any parking. Why can't I use a handicap spot? It's after 5, like, and somebody was like, we have disabilities. We use a wheelchair or something. It's not like we're vampires or the opposite of vampires or whatever. It's not like we can't be out after 5. Come on. So I think I've just seen in my life, Marco has just brought a whole lot of love and joy and things to congregations and just to anywhere he goes. I think he's brought a lot of awareness about mobility disorders and why we want things to be accessible. But Marco is in some ways pretty exceptional, and I don't think that somebody with much more severe disabilities who aren't so charming and where the joy and the reasons and what they bring to a congregation may not be as obvious, but I think that they're definitely there. Henry Nouwen was a beautiful theologian who's written a lot of books. And one of the books he wrote about was his experience as a caregiver with taking care of what are you laughing about, Gregor? Did I say something weird?
No, no, I have to say something after you're done, which has nothing to do with this, but it's just making me smile.
Okay, okay. So Henry Nouwen was a caregiver for a young man who, and I think this was while he was in seminary or before he went to seminary, for a young man who was nonverbal and needed help with feeding and toileting and everything like that. And just the profound impact this young man made on his spirit, his soul, his life in general, and his understanding. And as he got to know him and understand what made him happy and what made him sad, and how to have fun together, it's just a very touching book. And I think that's part. I think I think I think that's true of I I think there's just a benefit for a congregation in having that kind of diversity around. What would you say?
Well, I would say when I was a sophomore in college, um, in Nacogdoches, I worked at the Lufkin, they called it the Lufkin State School. I don't know, it may still be there. And so my job was to work with 6 nonverbal boys. And so I worked the 3 to 11 shift. And I can tell you, this was 1972. I am now 72. And the impact that those boys had on my life, I don't know how I impacted them because they were nonverbal, could never talk. But I can see their faces and I remember their spirits. And there was one of my favorite boys was Kyle. And Kyle, when he got out of the shower, it was time to go to bed, he was a streaker. And so first thing he would do is he would run toward the back door, and of course that meant I got to ask someone to watch the other 5 while I go chasing after him. And it was so funny. He would turn around and look at me to see if I was coming to catch him, and he knew I had to. And he's out there and he's butt naked running out in the yard. Thankfully, the state school is mile back from the road,
Thank you.
but I would imagine that these boys now were probably autistic, but um, that I think of them from time to time, even now. And like you were talking about, I wonder if what would have happened if those boys, if their families had kept them at home and brought them, to church and to Sunday school, and what impact they would, because they were, I mean, not that they couldn't get angry or wish that I'd done something a different way or maybe in a bad mood, but they were just gentle souls. And Kyle would walk up to me and he would grab my face and he'd say, "Oh, oh," and I'd say it back to him. So I mean, and then there was Skipper, and he was always was sitting with his legs crossed, but they were all nonverbal. So all of our communication every day was nonverbal. And I would say to them what I needed them to do, and they would do it for the most part. And if they didn't, then I would have to work with them to do it. And the thing was, I don't recall any of them having visitors, or if they had visitors, it was before I got there at 3 o'clock, you know. And to me, that has always been the saddest part of that experience. I only worked there a little over a year, and then I moved to Houston. But the
Well, then it
impact.
made it all the more important, the impact you had in their
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, I just wonder sometimes, what would have happened if, like Peggy, I guess their families just said, we're going to hide them away. We're going to put them in this facility
But
and, and, and that's it. And
yeah, that's
I
what the
have a,
doctors and everybody told you to do back then, though. It's not like parents really had a choice back then. That's just how people with
how it
those
was.
conditions were treated back then. And
Wow.
when the state, I think, um, eventually it came into the realization that depending on the diagnoses and the conditions, that these people can live at home. They don't have to be put in a hospital, or what I forget what they used to call it.
It is a state home. It's Lufkin State
Well,
Schools is what
yeah,
they
but
call it.
and opportunities for like group homes and things like that have improved too. Hopefully, but yeah, there are still some really bad situations. Just like in terms of people with dementia, there are there are improvements, but sometimes there are also places that are pretty bad, and families can't always do it all.
Right.
And sometimes there are situations that might, like some of Marco's peers. Um, he had a friend, a best friend when he was in elementary school, who had a rare chromosomal disorder that involved lots of facial anomalies and a very thick tongue that made it hard for him to speak. And then he had a little sister who had the exact same issues, which also involved some pretty severe intellectual disabilities. And
Okay,
when
Dan.
their mother just dedicated her entire life to seeing to their mental and physical and emotional needs. And but then when the younger sister got um had more medical needs, she just found that a group home was where Marco's friend needed to it wanted to be, and it was also very good for him socially, to be with peers instead of just at home after school after he had aged out of school. So I mean, in some cases, it's we can't judge what works best for some families. And um, hello.
Yeah,
So
I to bring it back to the church, I think that there may be this unspoken um idea, perhaps from some people who are uninformed, that a person with uh different abilities is somehow, it's like a curse. It's like, well, you did something wrong, or something like that. And that was another distressing part that I found. Because when I told people what kind of job I had and what I was doing, they were kids who were nonverbal to me. They dressed and they ate and they played, and they just didn't talk. And but they understood everything you said. So, um, but they were like, well, how can you work there? How, because there were others obviously who had other physical um abilities, mobility issues, who were different from the six boys that I took care of. But I I kept feeling that, like somehow this is a curse on this family, or a curse on this person. And
Absolutely heartbreaking though when you said
yeah,
they didn't have
yeah.
anyone come visit them.
yeah,
That just made me sad. I'm
yeah,
sad for
yeah, I
them.
was
How
sad
is
for
that
them.
possible? How could you
Well,
do that to a
they never
child?
Well,
took
I
us
won't
to
say
visit
they
Peggy.
didn't. I won't say they didn't. I'm just saying that when I was there from 3 to 11, none of them ever had visitors in the year that I knew of. So they may have had visitors, maybe. Well, I worked on the weekends too. So I mean, they were always there.
And
When
you
I
don't
got
know. I
there,
mean, they may have been,
I don't.
I mean, they may have been orphaned or
Right, that's
or
true.
something like
That's
that. I
true.
mean, you never know what happened with the family.
Yeah, I don't know.
So how good that you were there. And I remember for a little while I went to a deaf church in Amarillo, and and there were some Sundays when some caregivers would bring or maybe it was Wednesday nights or something like that a group home would come in together with the caregivers, and I just always thought that was so beautiful, and I thought it just it really just touched a lot of hearts and souls. But I think the church was very I the there was an incident that happened, and one of the girls who was nonverbal started making a lot of noise in the service, and I thought, well, how perfect that this isn't going to really bother anyone in a deaf church, and how wonderful to hear her expressions and things like that. But the senior pastor, who was not the one preaching that day, went up and asked the caregiver to take her out, and I was like, why
hurting
doing
anything.
that? It was I thought it was very hurtful and traumatizing, but he was just like, well, I know what it's like to be up there, and it's hard to concentrate if you're preaching, and I was just like,
So he
I
must have never been to a holiness church or
Right.
like that. I mean, 'cause
it
yeah,
was definitely I found it very hurtful and very poor example of what we want to see from it's different than our values in our church
right,
of
right,
diversity and inclusion.
And joyful noise is too
Yeah,
loud.
yeah.
right.
Right.
And I
Yeah,
remember a lot of churches like but when I didn't have like MCCs available or something like that, I remember feeling um embarrassed to go to a new church when Marco was young, and
right,
I'd feel like I spent the whole time going shh shh shh. You know,
right, right,
but and wouldn't it be lovely if no parent ever felt that way coming into our church?
right, right, right. It
That they
would
just
be
felt like they and their child were completely welcome
right,
and free to express.
right.
So
Yep,
so what I think there are many ways to make that possible, including all the things that we've talked about. But and some of it is just a welcoming smile and not being afraid to have kids running up and down the aisle, kids of any sort
So,
of age.
how do we do better as a church to say,
Well, I think there are ways to do better,
you're
but
welcome here?
first I want to talk about why.
mhm,
What is why is that part of our values, and um what um why do we want to include people? And what blessings does that bring to the congregation, to the individuals in the congregation? We've talked a little bit about that, but let's say a little more.
So
Okay.
I mean, I
I
think
know
about the
people,
song. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
no,
go. I've already spoken. Go ahead, Craig.
yeah.
No, just thinking about the song and the phrase, draw the circle wide, right?
mhm,
Um, and what do we gain when we do that? We gain different perspectives. We gain a greater sense of continued openness. We gain the ability to do for the least of these as we've been asked to do and as it's our duty to do. So we further exercise that muscle of inclusion that needs to be worked, because it's very easy, even in our own community, which we think of as being diverse, to still be exclusionary, and to be inclusive only of those who look like us or think like us or feel like us or act like us. But when we open our doors, when we open our hearts, when we open our minds to that which is different, that can feel uncomfortable, but a place of slight discomfort can also be a blessing, because it helps us to remember that we need to draw that circle wide. And we get that ability to provide that extra love, and that's a cyclical, circular blessing that just continues to go back and forth, right? So that's kind of what I think of when you ask the question of like, what do we gain or what do we benefit when we do these things?
Oh, I love the way you said that. Cyclical, circular love. That just comes back around. It just comes back around, doesn't it?
Hey, everybody. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hey. Well, I wanted to talk about what Marco, right? What Marco said. First, I was absent last week because that was our first real week, well, our week back to school. And I said, ooh, I'm going to get on at 6:30. And at 6:30, I was like, I was knocked out. And then this week, I had my therapy it was Tuesday, but my stomach was hurting. So I did it today from 6 to 7. As soon as I got up on here. And I was telling her that I've been going to this church for about 30 years on and off. And it's MCC. And I hadn't been there physically for a minute. And then when I went, Pastor Junius was saying she was leaving. And I just started bawling like a baby. And I couldn't stop crying because this lady and I have never had more than 10-minute talks. And we probably never talked maybe 6 or 7 times in the 30 years I've been there. But when I found out she was leaving, it broke my heart because, and what I ended up telling her verbally, I said, you saw me. And that meant so much to me. And I just was bawling like a baby, but she understood. And for me to go to a church on and off 30 years, and I was telling my therapist, I'm like, and people see me and they'll see me at an event and they'll say, oh, hi, welcome. And I'm like, oh my God, I just had a full conversation with you maybe like 2 months ago. You don't even know me. And it's one lady I keep introducing myself. I keep reintroducing myself. And I said, how can they not even know? I said, I'm big and I'm black. I said, that's something they should say, oh, I remember her. Oh, I said, but people don't remember me. And one day I made a joke. I said, well, I guess I'm just hard to forget. No, I said, I'm easy to forget. And she said, no. What's your name again? I said, Trina. But it's like, I feel like, and that's something we talk about in therapy about my physical appearance and how I feel like people don't include me a lot because of that. But I was like, you don't notice a person that big sitting in the back, and even if you never see them but 2 or 3 times a year, you say, "Oh, I know that lady. Oh, I seen that lady." And that is it's so when I talk to Pastor Junius and she know me, and I might be saying her last name wrong, it was overwhelming because even if I didn't talk to her 10 years or and I would call her and say, "Hey, this is Trina. I sit in the back," and she said, "I know you, Trina." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then we would talk about things that was going on in my life. And she didn't reject me. And when I first met her, y'all know how she looked when she first came to church? She was fine. And she used to wear them business suits with that haircut, and she wore them heels. So, and I always say for somebody to stop and talk to me because I didn't look like that. I that's something, and you can't just have a church just say, "Oh, we're diverse. We have everybody," and not speak to everybody. And it means so much when a person does come up to you and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And like a guy that was behind me that Sunday, he kept, and I realized that's a condition he was having. And one guy turned around and just kind of like, "Oh, that's so irritating." And before church was over, I was like, "Bye bye," you know. And it's just so you know that it didn't irritate me, and I knew that was something that you had to do to breathe, you know. So it's just things you do to make a person feel welcome. You just can't say it, you know.
Yeah, and it's that yeah, that's very nice. Kreger, you've had your hand up, so let me go to you before I say anything else.
Yeah, so I was watching Resurrection from home that day, Trina, because I go to Austin and then Paul and I come home and we watch Resurrection on TV. And I sat in my chair and I cried as well. And so I picked up my phone and I texted Denise and I said,
Yeah.
watching your message today from Austin, and all I can say is that I love you and I thank you for everything you've done for our community. You are and will continue to be blessed. And
Yes.
she wrote back and she said, "Thank you, Craig. Maybe I'll sign on to GodTalk sometimes to see you."
Yeah, she
And
she
that just
answered
tickled
that.
me. Because, Denise was coming quite often when we first started, but, she's really, busy and everything. And the other thing that I had to say while we're talking about church is that, Adrian, you were just spectacular with your solo with Cassandra last Sunday. It was, I loved it. Yeah, I loved
Thank
it. I
you.
just want to speak the name of Jesus. Oh, Lord. And then Craig, Tommy Martindale was posting on social media how much he misses your face. And so I thought,
Oh, was he?
Tommy Martindale, yeah. So I had
Oh,
that's why I was smiling because I was like, I just had something I needed to say to you guys that had really nothing to do with our topic, but thank
oh,
you.
give Tom hugs for me, please. Like,
Okay, Tommy.
See, that makes you feel good.
Wow, that's beautiful. Well, one of the things that Denise said was about family needs, and so I think it is in some ways related. But one of the things I want to say is like, so I'm in Lubbock right now with visiting primarily to visit my mother, and my mom has dementia and is in a memory care unit, and I mean, there's been a lot to go into the decisions about where she is, and I'm not happy with where the facility has forced us to be right now. So I'm kind of fighting that. But anyway, what I wanted to say was, my mother and I we've always had a good relationship. I had a pretty good childhood, and but mom was not as um emotional and kind of warm and fuzzy as my dad, actually. And uh and since she has developed dementia, I feel like we've actually gotten closer. There's something, Brene Brown talks a lot about vulnerability and how that really enhances the connections between people when you're open enough to really share the vulnerable parts of yourself. And I feel like mom's the development of dementia has created a vulnerability in her that in some ways has brought us very close. And
Mm.
and I think I just thought of this. So forgive me if I don't express it well. I haven't thought it out, but maybe that's some of what the church, like it feels in me, not just the fact that we're closer and she's letting me help in a way where she was always stoic and independent, in the past, and now she's letting me help, and that allows us to be closer. And it also fulfills something in me that I need to kind of trade places like that, take care of her in some of the ways that she took care of me. And I wonder if that's part of the purpose of the church too. I mean, we all need that. We all need a purpose and to kind of feel needed. And 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 having people with special needs of any sort, I think really enhances our sense of purpose and uh, just blesses us in ways that we may not even realize for for many years.
Interesting that you should say that um there was a vulnerability created in her. Um, I never met. Well, let me put it this way: I met my biological mother when I was 21, for the first time in my life, and long story short, she ended up getting Alzheimer's. And needless to say, there was some rocky road between she and I because I was angry, didn't understand why, she wasn't around, um, and why she never contacted me in those first 21 years, especially after I found out that she knew where I was, all along. Um, but when she got Alzheimer's and she was living in another state because she was living with her my my sister, um, and so it was near. She was getting really really ill, and my sister called and said, if you want to see her, come now because she is nearing the end. Her body is starting to shut down, which is what Alzheimer's does to you. Your organs just stop working the way they should. And so I flew up, and I had been angry for about 30, 35 years with her. We were in different states, and we didn't really have any contact after twice after I met her is the only time that I had that contact with her. But when I walked into her hospital room and looked at her, and she looked at me and she said, I know you. I know you. I know you from somewhere. And I looked in her eyes and she looked me in the eyes. And at that point, I forgave her for the pain that I felt that I had. And I forgave myself for how I had been unresponsive and didn't reach out and, all of that. And so they create her Alzheimer's, and that day created a vulnerability in me, and it made me understand um, the prayer, the Lord's prayer: forgive us as we forgive others.
Wow.
And that was really the defining moment when I, because we say the Lord's Prayer all the time,
Mhm.
and it's always forgive us as we forgive others. But when you don't forgive others, then we aren't forgiven. And so that vulnerability was created in me that day. And she passed away about a month later. But I remember distinctly that even though we couldn't talk, couldn't communicate, that my forgiveness, my willingness to let it go, that vulnerability, it was a magnificent and yet sad moment all at the same time.
That's beautiful. That is really beautiful. Suzette, it kind of makes me think of something you said before we started recording, before everyone was on the call yet, about the purpose of the church.
Mm.
Could you speak to that?
Well, in my opinion, I think of the church as just not only just a place, but a forum or a fortress for having being disciples. So my whole learning experience through this particular forum of online ministry has taught me that there's a bigger purpose here than just having community. The biggest purpose that we have, and the biggest purpose that we have collectively as a church, a people of a church, is to create discipleship. So that's in the book, From Social Media to Social Ministry. And the whole thing is about sharing the love of God and sharing the redemption of Christ and the forgiveness and all of the things, all of the loving and belonging and mattering that we all want so badly.
Yes.
That was the driving force to me to creating this, not to create, hey, we have 50 more members. We can maybe get 10 of them to tithe, No, I'm not getting paid to do this, I'm here to open doors and open hearts. And, yes, probably everybody here already is a disciple, but creating a safe place where someone can come and feel the sanctuary of that safe place, and being able to teach and talk about God and Jesus and how we are disciples of Christ, and where that is taking us as in humanity, as human beings, and how that will affect everyone that we can touch, whether it's in person or online. I think is the biggest mission of any church, is to be disciples of Christ. That's all we are. That's all.
Beautiful. Yes. And I want to bring it back to what Craig said earlier too. You talked about creating a safe space, sharing the love, sharing that sense of belonging. And Craig said about that being circular, cyclical thing. And so you share the love, you bring the love comes back to you.
Consistency, and people look for consistency, and people look for community, and they want to feel like they matter. And so that's what we're creating here, is a place for people to feel like they matter. And I try to make sure that's the messaging that we're putting out there.
Exactly. That's wonderful. And and I think that says a lot about what we envision about God and the way that we think and talk about God is that God is love, but also we're all made in God's image, and we learn as Christians, we tend to most of us believe that Jesus exemplified, brought us that image of who God is in the form of a human being, and that is a vulnerability. I mean, becoming mortal, becoming human. That's a huge vulnerability, and so I think God is willing to just be there with us in our vulnerabilities, um, in our what some people might see as imperfections. Uh, but might be just the higher calling, might be just the
And this is also a forum for, I get to come online with all of you each week, and I get to forget about my problems and what's happening in my life that's taking me away from those bigger goals that we collectively have. And I get to focus on you, and I get to focus on what you need and what you want to get out of this and try to help take you there. So that's why I'm
And I
here.
missed you guys. I honestly, it has become such a part of my routine. It's very much. Um, I don't want to miss this hour. I don't know. I was in Georgia at a conference last week, so and I didn't have my a laptop, so but yeah, I this is very, very important to me. It's become a routine in my life.
Oh,
So
that's
I
beautiful.
don't want to.
Marco said that a lot too, that how much he
Hmm.
makes being
So
Yeah.
with
we're
everyone.
having the visioning conversations, which you may not have heard about or you may have heard about. So there's going to be a visioning conversation that happens on September 8th for the online people, or the people can only
Oh.
attend online. So
Mm.
so it's mine and Carol's goal to take that opportunity to bring forward this idea that we started a year and a half ago with the online ministry, and where it can go and what it can do and how it can change things. And that's our opportunity to make the circle wider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've already signed up for that. I'm just hoping I can get home from Uprising on time to make it to the
We'll
Zoom.
wait for you.
Hey,
Excellent.
yeah. I don't buy a bike, you have a bike, a bike.
You don't want to bother everybody, but what?
I'm a yeah, get up.
He said what he wants to say is don't ever give up. Be part of the team.
Thank you,
Thank you
Marco.
for that encouragement.
Amen.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, we have
Thank
gone
you
a
for that
couple of
encouragement.
minutes over, so so I hope we can continue the conversation next week. We are planning to talk about immigration.
Oh,
We've been talking about that for a long time and have put it off for a couple of different reasons. But Marco may not be here. He wants you to know.
Okay, Marco.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you. Thank you,
We'll miss
Gregor.
you, Marco.
We'll see you next time, Marco. We
Thank you,
miss you.
Marco. Yes.
Did you put that up, Gregor, to talk about the
Yes,
Wednesday
they
night
talk
or?
about immigration some in this book, The False White
Oh,
Gospel, which is like the
okay.
most important book. This is the most important book I will read in 2024. I guarantee you.
Mm.
And we're studying it right now on Wednesday night in the Wednesday night group.
That's
But
good.
there's chapters to read. You got to keep up. That's why I like to say about God Talk, the only thing you have to bring to God Talk is your
It's
mouth and an
yourself.
opinion. You don't have to study.
Okay. Well, on that note, Gregor, why don't you pray us out?
All right. Holy Spirit, we're just grateful for another episode of God Talk, because we are recorded, and we are hoping that people that need to know that there's a place where they can go to find unconditional love and acceptance. We're right here. All they have to do is stumble across us on YouTube, and people can know about your inclusive love that we're trying to push out because you give it to us. And so that is our mission, and that is our hope. We're just so grateful for each person that came to the call tonight, and their thoughts and opinions that have been expressed in this room. And we just pray that our group continues to expand, and as we move forward into September, and we have the meetings about where we're headed as a congregation, that you just help us through that time. And we just need to stay focused on a couple of things. It's like, are we acting and behaving in love? And as Jesus was saying in Matthew 25:40, what you have done to the least of these, you have also done to me. And so, what are we doing to the least of these? And how can we do more? How can we reach out to communities and people? And we need help with all this. And so we just ask for your guidance, and we ask for your grace, and we ask for your love, and we thank you. And we hope to see everyone right back here next Thursday. And it's in Jesus' name that we pray tonight, right now. Amen.
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 Big wide hug to everybody.
Yes, love you. Bye.
See y'all next week.
I gotta thank you.
Bye, Marco.
Bye-bye, Marco.
Bye, Marco. Bye, Carol. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye, Craig.